snapped into focus. He reached the back of the garage, where his gun safe stood, a heavy steel box bolted to the floor. John was no stranger to firearms. He'd grown up hunting with his dad, served a stint in the National Guard, and kept a small collection for home defense. Most of it was standard: handguns, a shotgun, a couple of rifles. But there was one piece he'd bought years ago, more out of curiosity than necessity: a Barrett M82A1, a .50 caliber beast designed to punch through engine blocks and take down targets a mile away. It was overkill for any civilian, and John knew it. He'd taken it to the range a few times, felt the recoil that could bruise your shoulder, and then locked it away, figuring he'd never have a reason to touch it again. Until now. He punched in the code, opened the safe, and pulled out the Barrett. It was heavy, nearly 30 pounds, with a long black barrel that looked like it could stare down God himself. He grabbed a magazine, loaded it with 10 rounds, and walked back outside. The two fake cops were still there, arguing with Sarah, who was holding her ground despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. They didn't see John at first, not until he stepped onto the lawn, the Barrett held low but ready, his finger off the trigger but his intent clear. The tall one saw him first. His smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure confusion, like he couldn't process what he was seeing. The stocky one turned next, and his jaw dropped. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," he stammered, raising his hands. "What the hell is that?" John didn't raise the rifle. He didn't need to. The sight of it was enough, a weapon so comically oversized it made their fake badges and clipboards look like toys. "You put your hands on my wife," John said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "That was a mistake." The tall one tried to regain his composure, puffing out his chest. "You're threatening us? We're HOA enforcement. You pull that thing, you're looking at felony charges." John took a step forward, and they both flinched. "You're not HOA," he said. "You're not cops. You're two idiots who thought you could bully your way through my neighborhood. I don't know who you're working for, but you're done here." Sarah, standing behind him, spoke up. "John, don't. They're not worth it." Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor in it, not from fear but from the hospital-grade fear. "Call the police. Let them handle it." John didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on the two men. "I'm not going to shoot you," he said. "Not unless you make me. But you're going to tell me who you are, who you're working for, and why you're here. And you're going to do it now." The stocky one started babbling, his words tripping over each other. Okay, look, we didn't mean any harm. It's just a job, man. We get paid to deliver the notices, do the inspections. That's it." "Who pays you?" John asked, his grip tightening on the rifle. The tall one, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "Some guy named Marcus. Runs a company called Pinnacle Property Solutions. He gave us the uniforms, the badges, told us to act official. Said it was all legal." John's mind raced. Pinnacle Property Solutions. He'd never heard of it, but it sounded like the kind of vague, corporate name that could hide anything. "What's the game?" he asked. "Why the fake HOA?" The stocky one answered, his voice shaking. "They're trying to buy up the neighborhood. Get people to sell cheap. If they don't, we make life hard. Fines, notices, whatever. Most people pay up or move out." John felt a chill. This wasn't just a scam. It was a coordinated effort to drive people out of their homes. "Give me a name," he said. "Who's behind Pinnacle?" "I don't know," the tall one snapped, but his eyes darted to the side, a telltale sign he was lying. John raised the Barrett slightly, just enough to make them both step back. "Marcus Reed," the stocky one blurted. "That's all we know. He's got an office downtown. Please, man, don't shoot." John lowered the rifle, but only slightly. "Get in your car," he said. "Drive away. Don't come back. If I see you here again, you won't walk away." They didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled to their SUV, nearly tripping over each other, and peeled out, tires squealing. John watched them go, the Barrett still in his hands, his heart pounding but his resolve steady. Sarah stepped beside him, her hand on his arm. "You okay?" she asked. "No," John said. "But I will be." That afternoon, John sat at the kitchen table, the Barrett locked back in the safe. Sarah had a cold pack on her cheek, though she insisted it didn't hurt much. They called the police, reported the assault and the fake HOA scheme. The officer who came by was skeptical at first. Fake HOA cops sounded like something out of a bad movie, but when John showed him the stack of letters and the business card, the officer promised to look into it. John gave him Marcus Reed's name and the address of Pinnacle Property Solutions, which he'd found with a quick online search. Over the next few weeks, the pieces started coming together. Neighbors began comparing notes, and it turned out half the street had been getting similar letters. The police raided Pinnacle's office, a nondescript suite in a strip mall, and found evidence of a larger operation. Marcus Reed, it turned out, was a small-time real estate speculator with a history of shady deals. His plan was to scare residents into selling their homes at a discount, then flip the properties to a developer planning a luxury condo project. The fake HOA was just one of his tactics, intimidation dressed up in bureaucracy. Reed was arrested, charged with fraud, assault, and a laundry list of other offenses. The two fake cops, whose real names were Gary and Mike, turned on him, spilling everything in exchange for lighter sentences. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, but John didn't feel like celebrating. He kept thinking about how close they'd come to losing their home, their peace, all because someone thought they could be bullied. Sarah recovered quickly, her cheek healing without a scar. But John changed after that day. He started attending neighborhood watch meetings, organizing the residents to keep an eye out for scams like Pinnacle's. He even taught a few neighbors how to spot fake documents and question authority that didn't add up. The Barrett stayed in the safe, but John made sure it was clean and ready, just in case. Willow Creek went back to being a quiet neighborhood, but John never forgot the sound of that slap or the weight of the rifle in his hands. He'd stood up for his wife, his home, and his neighbors. And if anyone tried to mess with him again, he'd be ready, Barrett or no Barrett. It was a quiet Saturday morning in the suburban cul-de-sac when the sound of a slap echoed through the neighborhood, followed by the sight of two men in fake uniforms claiming to be HOA enforcers. But they didn't expect John, a man pushed too far, to step out of his garage with a Barrett .50 cal in his hands, ready to turn their power trip into a nightmare they'd never forget. John had always been a man who kept to himself. Living in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, he and his wife, Sarah, had carved out a modest but comfortable life. Their two-story home, with its neatly trimmed lawn and freshly painted shutters, blended seamlessly with the other houses on the block. John worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop, and Sarah ran a small online business selling handmade candles. They weren't flashy people, no fancy cars, no loud parties. Just a couple trying to live their lives without bothering anyone. But trouble has a way of finding even the quietest folks. It started with the letters. About 6 months ago, John and Sarah began receiving notices in their mailbox. Official-looking documents with bold headers reading Willow Creek Homeowners Association. The letters cited minor infractions, a mailbox that was slightly misaligned, a hedge that was 2 inches too tall, a car parked improperly in their own driveway. At first, John thought it was a mistake. They'd lived in Willow Creek for nearly a decade and had never heard of an HOA. The neighborhood was old, built in the 70s, long before HOAs became the suburban gatekeepers they are today. He figured some overzealous neighbor was playing a prank or a new property management company was trying to flex its muscles. Sarah, always the diplomat, suggested they call the number listed on the letters. The voice on the other end was curt, professional to a fault, but vague. "We're the Willow Creek HOA," the man said. "All residents are subject to our regulations." When John pressed for details, who formed the HOA, where was their office, what gave them authority, the line went dead. That was the first red flag. Over the next few months, the letters grew more aggressive. Fines started appearing: $50 for a trash can left out past pickup day, $100 for a non-compliant porch light, $200 for excessive noise when John had mowed his lawn at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. The fines piled up, and the demands became absurd. One letter even claimed their dog, a lazy golden retriever named Max, was a nuisance because he barked twice at a passing squirrel. John and Sarah laughed it off at first, but the humor faded when a final notice arrived, threatening legal action if they didn't pay $2,500 in accumulated fines. John wasn't the type to roll over. He'd grown up in a rough part of town, learned to fix cars with his dad, and had a low tolerance for bullies. He started asking around the neighborhood. None of their neighbors, old-timers like the Wilsons or the Garcias, had ever heard of an HOA either. A few had received similar letters but tossed them, thinking they were scams. John dug deeper. He called the county clerk's office, checked property records, and confirmed what he suspected: Willow Creek had no registered HOA. Whoever was sending these letters was operating outside the law. He thought about going to the police, but Sarah convinced him to hold off. "Let's not escalate this," she said. "Maybe it's just some idiot with too much time on their hands. If we ignore it, they'll stop." John didn't like it, but he trusted Sarah's judgment. She was the calm to his storm, always knowing how to talk him down when his temper flared. So, they stopped responding to the letters, tossed them in a drawer, and hoped the problem would go away. It didn't. On that fateful Saturday morning, John was in the garage tinkering with an old carburetor he'd salvaged from a junkyard. Sarah was out front, watering the flower beds she'd spent weeks perfecting. The sun was high, the air was warm, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the hum of a distant lawnmower. John heard the car pull up before he saw it, a black SUV with tinted windows, parking across the street. Two men stepped out, dressed in navy blue uniforms that looked like they'd been ordered from a costume shop. They wore badges that glinted in the sunlight, but something about them screamed fake. Maybe the way the patches were slightly crooked or how their belts sagged like they'd never worn them before. John didn't think much of it until he heard Sarah's voice, sharp and startled. "Excuse me. What are you doing?" He set down his wrench and stepped out of the garage, wiping grease from his hands. The two men were standing on his lawn, one holding a clipboard, the other looming over Sarah. The guy with the clipboard was tall, maybe 6 feet 3 inches, with a buzz cut and a smirk that made John's blood simmer. The other was shorter, stocky, with a face like he'd been chewing gravel. "You're in violation of HOA Code 47B, the tall one said, reading from his clipboard like it was scripture. "Unapproved modifications to your flower beds. You've got 24 hours to remove them or face a $500 fine." Sarah, still holding the watering can, looked at them like they'd lost their minds. "We don't have an HOA, she said firmly. "You need to leave our property." The stocky one stepped closer, too close, and John felt his fists clench. "Ma'am, we're authorized to enforce regulations. You don't comply, we can escalate this to the county sheriff." John was halfway across the lawn now, his boots heavy on the grass. "Hey!" he called out, his voice low but carrying the weight of a man who wasn't playing games. "She told you to leave. I suggest you listen." The tall one turned, sizing John up. "You must be the husband," he said, his smirk widening. "We've got a file on you. Non-compliant resident. You owe $2,500 in fines. Pay up, or we'll lien your house." John stopped a few feet away, his eyes narrowing. "You're not cops, and there's no HOA. I checked with the county." "So, who the hell are you?" The stocky one laughed, a short, barking sound. "We're the ones who make the rules, buddy. You don't like it, take it up with our office." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled business card, tossing it at John's feet. "Call that number. Maybe they'll explain it to you." Sarah stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "You're trespassing. Get off our property, or I'm calling the real police." That's when it happened. The tall one moved fast, too fast for John to react. He raised his hand and slapped Sarah across the face, not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to make her stagger back, the watering can slipping from her hands and hitting the ground with a dull thud. The sound of that slap, sharp and ugly, cut through the morning air like a gunshot. John froze for half a second, his mind processing what he'd just seen. Sarah touched her cheek, her eyes wide with shock, not pain. The tall guy smirked again, like he'd just won something. "Maybe that'll teach you to respect authority," he said. "That was their mistake." John didn't say a word. He turned and walked back to the garage, his steps deliberate, his mind a furnace of rage. He didn't see the world in red, like people say. It was clearer than that, like the world had